There's a type of memory that bypasses logic entirely. You're doing something mundane. Maybe the light hits a room a certain way, or a smell drifts through an open window. And without warning, you're not a grown adult anymore. You're 11 years old. It's a Sunday. The house is quiet. The floor is sun-warmed. Cartoons have been on since before anyone else woke up. And the day belongs entirely to you. No schedule, no supervision. Just time. If that image settled somewhere deep in your gut, you were probably born between 1965 and 1980. You are, in other words, Gen X. Gen X got a childhood so distinctly its own that it almost defies description to anyone who wasn't there. Millennials look back at it with a kind of wistful longing. Boomers don't quite see themselves in it. But you lived every frame of it. And what I want to do today is walk through 10 of those defining moments. Not just as hits of nostalgia, but because the psychology underneath them is genuinely surprising. Some of it is flattering. Some of it is uncomfortable. All of it is real. Let's get into it. Number 1. Saturday morning cartoons. This was not content. This was not a library of on-demand programming waiting patiently for you to feel like watching. Saturday morning cartoons existed inside a specific window, roughly 7 to noon. And when that window closed, it was closed. The networks moved on. The day moved on. And that was that. Until next week. What that structure quietly did was build anticipation as a skill. You looked forward to things. You planned around them. You woke up voluntarily at an absurd hour, poured cereal in the dark, and treated those 5 hours like an event. Modern entertainment has eliminated that feeling so completely that it's almost impossible to explain to someone younger why the ending of that window felt like something. Number 2. Phone numbers you actually knew. Not stored, not synced, known. You could dial your best friend, your aunt, the pizza place, maybe the movie theater's recorded info line, from memory, in the dark, in an emergency, no hesitation. That same brain now loses track of passwords you created yourself last month. And the difference isn't age, not entirely. It's that your mind was never given the option to outsource that information, so it held on. Those numbers meant something beyond their digits. They were proof of connection, proof that people in your life existed in a form you could reach without a device doing the work for you. Number 3. The key around your neck. Somewhere around 40% of Gen X kids came home from school to an empty house. A key on a string. A note, maybe. No adult, no plan, no structured after-school programming waiting to fill the gap. The cultural context matters here. Divorce rates had roughly doubled since the late 60s. Women were entering the workforce in record numbers, and the infrastructure for childcare simply hadn't kept pace. Kids adapted. They made sandwiches. They watched younger siblings. They sat with the particular quiet of an empty house until it stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like just a Tuesday. Nobody planned for that to produce anything useful. But that almost unnerving self-reliance Gen X carries, that's not a personality trait. That's a direct inheritance. Number 4. Missing children on milk cartons. If you were eating breakfast at a school cafeteria any time in the mid-80s, you were probably doing it across from someone's face. A photo. A name. A last known age. The word missing. This was a real national campaign. Launched in 1984, and someone decided the right vehicle for it was the side of a child's morning milk carton. There was no explanation offered, no adult sitting down to provide context or comfort. You looked at it. You drank your milk. You went to class. What that created, slowly and invisibly, was a generation carrying a low-grade awareness that the world had edges, that safety wasn't guaranteed, and nobody was going to formally address that for you. Somehow, that silent exposure produced adults who are remarkably difficult to rattle. Number 5. The lawn darts era. I'll be brief here, because the situation really does explain itself. Lawn darts were a product marketed to families for backyard recreation. They had metal tips. They were aerodynamically designed to be hurled skyward. They were used by children, barefoot, in the grass, with limited adult oversight, until 1988, when they were finally pulled from shelves following thousands of documented injuries and multiple deaths. Gen X played with these regularly. The survival rate is objectively impressive. Number 6. The encyclopedia as infrastructure. You had a question. Maybe it was for homework. Maybe it was to settle an argument. Maybe pure curiosity got a hold of you and wouldn't let go. Your options were walk to the library or consult the encyclopedias on your shelf if your family had a set. Those books, sold door to door, expensive, weighty, often a few years behind the times, were the entire searchable universe in your home. If the volume you needed was missing, or the answer fell outside what the editors had chosen to include, you simply didn't know yet. You waited. You went to the library on Saturday. What that trained, without anyone calling it training, was a tolerance for uncertainty. Information had a price in time. The gap between asking and knowing was real, and you learned to exist inside it. Number 7. Recording songs off the radio. You heard something that grabbed you, a song that lit something up, and your one path to keeping it was positioning yourself beside a tape deck with your thumb on the record button and waiting. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for hours. And when the DJ finally played it again, that lurch of adrenaline as you dove for the button, and almost every time, you caught it half a second late, or you got the DJ talking over the intro, or the last note got clipped by a commercial. And you kept the tape anyway, because you made it, and that mattered. Behavioral psychology has a name for this: effort justification. We assign greater value to things that cost us something to obtain. Every handmade mixtape Gen X ever held onto is a perfect case study. Number 8. The television going to sleep. There was a point, late at night, when the TV just stopped. The broadcast day had a closing time. What came after was a test pattern, geometric, toneless, utterly indifferent, and the implicit instruction that the world was no longer available to you. That was it. You went to sleep. The day was over. There is something almost impossible to fully convey about that boundary now. This natural, enforced line between consuming and resting that required no discipline or self-control on your part because the infrastructure simply enforced it. It just ended, and you moved on. Number 9. Atari and the imagination gap. The visuals were, with great affection, barely visual. A white rectangle moved. That was your character. A blocky shape approaching from the right was, apparently, an alien spacecraft. 2 color pixel clusters were whatever the game's title told you they were. And what happened inside that gap between what the screen showed and what the game claimed was happening was extraordinary. Your brain narrated the rest. You supplied the tension, the story, the stakes. The emotional investment was enormous precisely because it was self-generated. This connects to something researchers call the reminiscence bump, the well-documented tendency for adults to remember experiences from their adolescent years more vividly and with more emotional weight than other periods. For Gen X, those years were packed with experiences that demanded active imagination rather than passive reception, and the brain filed them differently as a result. Number 10. Being told you were fine. You wiped out. You were told to get up. You had a day that left a mark. You were handed dinner, and the subject moved on. You tried to say something that mattered, and the adult in the room found somewhere else to look. And eventually, not through therapy or intention or any design process, you learned to keep going anyway. Gen X is regularly described as the most underparented generation in modern American history. And that phrase tends to be delivered like an accusation. But the people who came up that way developed something that is genuinely difficult to teach. The quiet, unshakable knowledge that they've handled hard things before. That discomfort is survivable. That they don't need the room to be comfortable before they move through it. There's a reason nostalgia for this era hits the way it does, even when it's collective, even when millions of people share the same memory. Psychologists have documented for decades that the experiences we accumulate during our formative years don't just become memories. They become the structural material of identity, the framework underneath everything we believe about ourselves and the world. For Gen X, that framework got built in quiet houses, in Saturday morning living rooms, with a tape queued up and a thumb poised over a button, waiting for something worth holding on to. You did a lot of waiting, actually. You got pretty good at it. If any of this landed for you, if something in it felt like being recognized, and you're finding now that your sleep is uneven, your attention keeps slipping, or your system is just running too hot from years of overstimulation, I've put a link in the description and pinned it in the comments. It's a bundle of 20 guides and planners built around exactly those things: sleep, focus, stress, dopamine regulation, mental clarity, structured week by week so it's actually usable. I think you'll find it worth the look.